response to China's overcapacity in the EV sector specifically. The decision comes as President Joe Biden gears up for a rerun of his 2020 contest with Republican rival Donald Trump in November's presidential elections. And moving on now. L&T is set to exit the Hyderabad Metro project and the director has blamed government's free ride policy. L&T, which owns 90% of the Hyderabad Metro project, is planning to sell off the Hyderabad Metro project post-2026. The firm's director, R. Shankar Raman, has said that free bus scheme initiated by Congress government has made ridership, and I quote, less interesting. The Telangana government's Mahalakshmi bus scheme offers women and transgender travel free of cost on government-run non-AC buses. Now, L&T director said that the current 480,000 people who use Hyderabad Metro daily are not enough, and the company needs to lighten the debt burden as the current ridership is not getting the due momentum it needs. L&T had successfully, remember, negotiated a 3,000 crore rupees soft loan with the Telangana government to be repaid without interest. The company has a 65-year concession to run the metro system, but is now looking for a buyer. What exactly is happening here? My colleague Krishna Kumar here with me in the studios. Krishna, hi. Run us through what L&T's directors' concerns are at the moment and why don't they want to hold on to Hyderabad Metro?
Yeah, to the point where they're actually looking to sell off the Hyderabad Metro come the year 2026, and it all begins with that number you're talking about, the ridership number, which is currently at 480,000. Guess how much it was in November 2023? It was 550,000. And in December 2023 was when this free bus ride scheme was initiated by the new Telangana government and the new Congress government in Telangana under Chief Minister Revanth Reddy. And since then, the numbers have fallen sharply by 70,000. And not just that, Director Shankar Raman is also talking about the fact that there is a difference, there's a gender divide in the way the ridership is there in the Hyderabad Metro. Now, you have all the women moving away from the metro and moving
taking to that free bus ride.
Free bus rides, and despite the fact that there are not enough buses, they are not increasing the number of buses. They've just given free rides to women. So he's wondering, why did you even do that if you're going to not anticipate the fact that there's so much of women ridership is going to come into buses? You should have ideally had more buses. So the number of buses haven't increased. But what women have started to do, simply because there's a free bus ride, they're not taking the metro anymore. So there is a gender divide in the way the metro is being used in
And
Hyderabad.
it's also, come to think of it, Krishna, a classic case of how SOPs and doles really end up hurting not just government in the long run, but also private players who are essentially operating for profit. So if there's no profit in running Hyderabad Metro anymore, L&T is going to sell it off.
Bear in mind, L&T got this project in the year 2010 at a cost of 20,000 crore rupees, not one or two, 20,000 crore rupees. It was completed in the year 2020. It is currently has a debt burden of around 13,000 crore rupees plus 2,000 crore rupees it has run over. It wants to bring that debt burden from 13 plus 2, which is 15, to about 8,000 crore rupees, for which L&T is also looking to sell all the assets attached, the land assets attached with the Hyderabad Metro Rail project. That's how clear it is about cutting down its debt burden. Enough is enough. You spend so much on it, hoping that the ridership will only increase, and then government brings in these free SOPs, which reduces the ridership and then brings that much more cost pressure on running the Hyderabad Metro Rail project. And despite doing all of this, it still has looking at a possibility of eventually exiting it. But what does it mean by exiting it? Currently, the Hyderabad Metro Rail project, 90% of the stake is held by L&T, and 10% of it is held by the Telangana state government. So L&T, which is a 90% stakeholder, is looking to exit it altogether because it's going to be unsustainable eventually. That's the projection it's making. In a couple of years from now, it wouldn't want to carry this kind of debt burden, which is like 20,000 crore rupees it spends, and then currently it still has around 13 to 15,000 crore rupees. Looking to bring it down. Even monetizing all the assets associated with the Hyderabad Metro Rail project will not be enough to make it make sense in the books of L&T.
Or to break it even, for that matter. So L&T, they're looking to sell its 90% stake in Hyderabad Metro Rail projects. It's not making the money that it needs. Currently, the ridership is about 480,000. The ridership is not going up due to Telangana government's Mahalakshmi bus scheme, which offers free rides for women and trans people, and that really is not doing anything good for Hyderabad Metro. We're going to leave it at that. Time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories on the other side. Keep watching Newsline.
forever there are simultaneous election of parliament, assembly and municipality and panchayat. So that framework has to be given in the constitution. That amendment has been suggested.
Are you going to take away the power of dissolution?
I mean, it doesn't require any rocket science to do this. It's a simple constitutional amendment, and the idea is everything goes together.
The Law Commission has set the ball rolling for one nation, one election. Basically, if all goes well, then India may see simultaneous elections to Lok Sabha, state assemblies, municipalities and panchayats in 2029.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Has Allu Arjun arrived or he's just taking off?
If I really want to hit a moonshot, I want the moon.
These are big stories.
It's very unique to Indian cinema.
What would be the relevance of tradition?
I would believe that the first change has to come in the mind.
World premiere on the 18th of May, only on News 9 Live at 9 p.m.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
That ink is a semi-permanent dye called the indelible ink.
We are the sole manufacturer of this indelible ink.
Don't try to repair something which is working.
And if you have facial recognition, you can go vote in any booth anywhere based on where you are, and then it will be recorded that you can't vote anywhere else again.
Can we retire indelible ink and use biometrics? Theoretically, my answer would be yes.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're with us on News 9 and this is Business Plus. OpenAI makers of ChatGPT have made several big announcements and interesting updates yesterday. The most significant is the launch of the GPT-4a or 4o rather, a new AI model that works as a voice assistant. Now GPT-4o, the new model of OpenAI claims that it will revolutionize the way we interact with artificial intelligence. It can handle complex questions, provide personalized suggestions. It's basically more advanced AI than ever. With me are my colleagues Amit Ranjan, Krishna Kumar. I want to come to you, Amit. You've been tracking all those developments that OpenAI has unveiled as of last evening. What's most exciting?
This model over ChatGPT 3.5 reacts to text, video and audio. The previous model could take one prompt at a time and would react only to audio messages. This one can talk to you and look at the environment around you. Simply put, you can scribble a math problem on a piece of paper and it can look at it and solve it for you. Previously, you couldn't do that. You would have to type it in. So that is one thing. According to what Sam Altman said, that he wants to give the capability of advanced AI to users for free. Now this is free. There is a limit, of course, to the amount of text messages you can send. But once that limit is
reached, the user will immediately be transferred to 3.5 version.
Okay.
So he can basically use that after that.
All right.
But yeah, it's a more powerful system. It's the next step into what AI can do with you.
All right, so it's the most powerful system I have at least seen till now. And some of those videos, Krishna, I'm sure you're also fascinated. It can look, it can see, it can hear you, and it can take prompts verbally as well. And I think most interesting bit was that it can read the environment around you and tell you where you are. It can directly translate, so language barriers are gone. So it can be a personalized friend. All of those features, of course, are part of the new advanced platform, the advancements that have been made in GPT. Run us through the other advancements that have been made in GPT. Apart from the GPT-4o, which was launched, the new Chat GPT is now more advanced.
Yeah, 50 languages. That is the one big advancement they have done. Better at understanding and discussing images. And what is to come next is, right now it can hear you talk in real time. And this may be just few weeks away. Next thing is it can see you, and you can have video real time chats with ChatGPT, and this advancement may just be weeks away. So it's a more powerful system, more languages, much faster, even to the extent that the voices that it can basically have intonations for you. It can talk to you in the kind of voice you want it to talk to you in. So it can. Number two, it can 50 languages. It can look at a menu. You don't have to key it in. You can look at a menu in, say, Russian language, and it can translate it for you. It can give you the ingredients that go into specific dishes, and it can even give you recommendations. So
anything that you did not think of prior to the new, revelation or the new upgradation that OpenAI has come up with is now possible, Krishna. It's extremely fascinating.
The only question is that this comes after the introduction of Sora by OpenAI. So does this mean that you can literally talk to ChatGPT now and then create a video by just talking to it?
The video one is just few weeks away, as they say, real-time video. But yeah, simply put, ChatGPT-4o has eyes.
Oh, it has eyes. It has more than eyes. It can also hear you. It can talk to you. And I was wondering, what's the difference between Siri at the present current moment? If my memory serves me right, a similar sort of environment of exuberance or what AI will entail was when I spoke to Siri for the first time, and this is even bigger and this is even better. I think the most revolutionary impact it may just have is on the education system, where it can actually teach. It can break down not just a mathematical problem, but also any other problem in any other language, in any language out there in the world, about 50 languages
50
so
right
far.
now, but it's going up.
And it can really help your child learn. So the implications of the advancements in OpenAI's ChatGPT are going to be revolutionary in days and months to come, and we'll see those applications, of course, in future time. But we're going to move on for now. Food tech major Zomato has decided to voluntarily surrender its online payment aggregator license. Zomato says they have no significant competitive advantage against incumbents in the payment space and don't foresee a business in payment space as commercially viable, at least for now. The development comes months after the company received the license from Central Bank to operate as an online payment aggregator with effect from 24th of January 2024. Now, Zomato said its board of directors has decided to withdraw the payment aggregator application submitted with the RBI to operate as the issuer of prepaid payment instruments so far. So that, of course, is Zomato letting go of its payment aggregator license, saying it's not viable at this point in time to operate as a payment service provider. And inflation figures for the month of April have started pouring in, and the numbers present a very stark contrast between India and China as the world's largest economies. Now, India's retail inflation rate eased slightly in April, partly due to lower fuel prices, although food prices remain elevated. Annual retail inflation in April was 4.83%, down from 4.85% in March in India. Food inflation, which accounts for nearly half the overall consumer basket, rose about 8.7 in April compared to 8.52 in the previous month. In China too, consumer inflation quickened in April, holding just above the zero mark for the third consecutive month, while industrial prices extended a long decline, highlighting weaker demand in economy. The consumer price index rose 0.3% from a year earlier compared to an increase of 0.1% in the month of March. Factory gate prices remain stuck in deflation as they have been since late 2020, with the producer price index sliding to 2.5 in April from a year earlier. The numbers suggest that deflationary pressure remain a threat to Chinese economy despite green shoots in manufacturing sector as well as robust export. Karthik Malhotra joining us here in the studio along with Krishna. Karthik, you look at the stark contrast between these numbers. While India on one hand is dealing with inflation, China is trying to get out of deflation.
Absolutely. So, India, the target that India has set, the central bank has set for itself is 4% inflation. The target that the Chinese central bank has set for itself is 3%. And now look at the stark contrast. India is nearing around 5%, wants inflation to come down to 4%. China targeting 3% is actually hovering in the range of just about 0.3% or so. So needs inflation to go up. And that is pretty much now dictating policy action as well. For example, India is unable to cut rates, and India's rates continue to be elevated simply because we are unable to hammer down that inflation down to 4%. And China, on the other hand, is actually cutting rates at a time when the rest of the world is increasing rates. China has been cutting rates, and the last rate cut happened by 25 basis points in the month of Feb to actually inch up inflation slightly. So obviously two very, very different contrasting scenarios emerging from two neighbors and two trading partners, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, that's the kind of times that we live in.
Absolutely. Let's talk about India for that matter. So inflation in India not under that 4% mark of RBI just as yet. So India, of course, the prices will continue to hover where they are at the moment, with a rate cut perhaps later in some part of this year, if at all. While for China, it's the exact opposite, as you just mentioned. They are cutting down rates and they will continue to cut down rates. Consumption in China is not picking up from the numbers that are coming out.
Absolutely. And consumption again is a function of, your rate cuts actually impact which sectors. You as a consumer will get impacted with the rate cut if you're looking at buying property, if you're looking at buying a high value purchase, taking a loan from a bank. So the two most obvious scenarios that come to mind is you as a consumer want to buy a house, or you as a consumer want to buy a car. And that is when you go knocking on the bank's door asking for a loan, and a lower loan is actually going to help you or make that particular purchase more affordable for you. Both these sectors, incidentally, in China have tanked. So you're unable to sell property, and you're actually not even able to sell as many cars that you would like to. The exact opposite is actually happening in India, where you're in a high interest rate regime, where your loans are expensive.
And yet the consumption is crazy.
You're buying retail like never before, and you're buying real estate like never before, and you're buying cars like never before.
All right, so there's a very stark contrast there. But for those of us who really need to understand how deflation and inflation work in China at this point in time, what we are looking at is lower interest rates, and yet people are not buying. So how do you really explain it?
So as I see it, there's a fundamental problem right now in China, Shweta, and and that has to do with the government in China actually doling out that surplus, which has been pending for years now. So, if you go back in history, the last time that India and China were both comfortable with inflation numbers was pre-pandemic, was in 2019. And it's only in 2019 that you saw that China had an inflation rate of about 2.9%, just very, very near to the 3% mark. And India's inflation was near about 4%. It's been 5 years, both countries have been struggling with inflation stroke deflation. Now, to come to your specific question, I think the Chinese people need money in their hands, and that money is hard to come by. And look at the story that you opened the show with. US is now imposing fresh tariffs on China, which means the factory output from China is going to actually become double the cost if you talk about electric vehicles, which are now going to attract almost
demand will be
100%
now way
tariff.
lower.
So why will anybody in the world want to buy a China-made electric vehicle, or a China-made semiconductor, or a China-made battery, or a China-made solar panel? And on all of these, tariffs are now going to come at 50% and upwards, which means job creation in China is going to continue to be a problem, and there is going to be some way through which the government will have to inject liquidity in the system to get people to at least go out and buy, and that should be a driver for the Chinese economy. But data coming on China's own economic growth is equally surprising, because China is saying it grew 5.2%. From where?
All right, so the numbers don't quite make sense. So I'm coming to India, and before we move on from this story, in India, the picture is exactly the opposite, as Karthik pointed out. Despite a very high interest rate regime, it does look like, at least for food inflation, although high interest rate has very little to do with how food prices will pan out, that continues to be a problem at over 8%, Krishna.
Right, those are the only dark clouds in all the greenery that Karthik pointed out. Yes, of course, for that 4.83 level of inflation to come down to the manageable 4%, which both the government of India and the Reserve Bank of India, before it even gets close to any kind of cutting rates, it would want it to be at least below the 4.5% range. And for that to happen, food prices have to cool down. And we really, unfortunately, the factors controlling food prices are not very controllable. So hence, it's going to be, and you've seen the headlines hitting the home cooked veg thali prices inching up month on month. So I mean, if the vegetarian thali is going up, no questions asked, the non-vegetarian thali is also going up. So the thalinomics is not really working out for India at this stage. But the fact of the matter is that all it needs to be done is to be brought, that increase is to be brought under controllable levels. It is going to increase one way or the other. If it can be brought down to controllable levels, less than 4.5%, closer to the 4% range, then the Reserve Bank of India will even think of the possibility of cutting rates at some point of time during this calendar year or this fiscal year. But for that to happen, time will tell whether that's going to happen quickly or not. But that's certainly a problem that India will deal with, even as it looks at the fact that the consumption story is going strong, and that's very important for India's GDP numbers. India is, if it wants to push up its GDP numbers, the consumption story has to keep booming. Indians have to continue buying everything from cars to real estate to flooding the malls over there. But then, of course, there's stories of how so many malls have become ghost malls these days. But then so many Indians are, of course, shopping online instead of going to the malls. So that the consumption story, apart from
unabated,
is unabated. That's fine, but there has to be some rational, the rationing of food prices, and that being brought down to more controllable levels.
All right, food inflation at about 8.7%, not going down too well with a lot of common people out there. But look at the stark contrast figures on your screen at this point in time of inflation in India versus China. Inflation in the month of April for China at 0.3%, for India at just over 4.8%. But we're going to leave it at that and move on to a story that is coming in all the way from Government of India, which has now issued an advisory to citizens to not take calls seriously, wherein callers are threatening to disconnect either their mobile numbers or suggest that their mobile numbers are being misused in some illegal activities. The Department of Telecommunication, or DOT, has issued advisory about WhatsApp calls from foreign origin numbers like +92, which impersonate government officials and dupe people. Now, cyber criminals through such calls try to threaten or steal personal information to carry out cyber crimes and financial frauds. The DOT and telecom regulator said it does not authorize anyone to make such calls on its behalf and has advised people to stay vigilant and report such fraud communications at Chakshu facility of Sanchar Sathi portal. The DOT also advises citizens to report cybercrime on helpline number 1930 or 1930 or www.cybercrimegovernment.in in case of already being a victim of cybercrime or financial fraud. So that, of course, is the helpline on which you can call. I just want to take a quick reaction from the two of you. It does look like the Government of India is taking efforts time and again, but I feel it's a little too slow and a little too less at this point in time. All of us, majority, in fact, are getting these calls on a daily basis. I keep getting these messages on WhatsApp from +92 to +95, different numbers from different countries were telling me that they have a job offer for me. And a lot of people, of course, fall prey to it on a daily basis, Karthik.
No, you're right. Son, if you look at social media also, your feed would be inundated with so many people who are actually posting screenshots of their mobile phones. Either they've received a text which has a link in it, or it seems like a bank-driven message, but there's actually a full 10-digit mobile number on top. And of course, calls that you get, these calls obviously are unavoidable because you don't know. There could be a call, which you need to answer, and you don't know whether that number is real or fake, and then you end up actually answering that call. And some of these calls really sound genuine, like some of these texts really sound genuine. But I think an advisory coming in from the government, maybe too little, maybe too late. But the point is, you've got to start somewhere, and at least those baby steps are being taken. I remember about 5 or 6 years back, Shweta, we were discussing blockchain as this new emerging technology, and one of the use cases that the then TRAI Secretary R.S. Sharma had laid out in that public forum was that blockchain can actually be used to put an end to spam calls. It's been at least 6 years or so since that event took place in Mumbai, and we still have actually nothing by way of technology which is able to hard block these calls or these text messages.
All right, so nothing by the way of technology, but advisories on advisories there, of course, to not take, Krishna, these calls very seriously. And a lot of us are getting those calls, especially parents and elderlies or children saying that your parents have taken loan from us and kindly repay this money. So one way or the other, trying to trap people, a lot of whom lose money and never get it back.
Yeah, recently we had the instance where somebody said that the money has been wrongly credited your account needs to be taken off, and then asked for an OTP, and then eventually the good news is that eventually that person was able to take the matter to the police station and then get the money back. But the fact of the matter is that these kind of advisories at least alert people to the fact that this kind of a menace exists. What needs to be done going forward is, as Karthik has rightly pointed out, either use technology or speak to these telecom players, figure out a way in which these calls don't come in the first place and they get blocked even before they reach your mobile phones. Because these days, to identify a spam is getting increasingly difficult. We thought that the moment there's a spam call, we'll know it because it comes in that red color on your phone. Not necessarily. So many of these calls are spam calls, but don't show up as spam calls from the moment it reaches our phone.
Absolutely. In fact, I was added in 2 such groups, at least on WhatsApp, where they tried selling me a certain product, or they told me you just have to leave a review and that's about it.
I've been added in 2 of those groups, so Shweta. All they said was just all you have to do is go write a review and then tell us, and then we will credit some money into your account, and you keep doing that all the time. And then the good thing was that at least me and bunch of other people who added on the group, an overwhelming majority of them figured out the fact that this was a spam and this was a scam, and they got out of the group immediately, including me. The only hope is that lesser and lesser number of people fall prey to these things. In fact, 0 number of people fall prey to these things.
All right, well, that's the hope, and the government is also advising people to not fall prey to it. But before we close this bulletin, a global story coming in a sharp critique. Indian-American academic and entrepreneur Vivek Vadhva has condemned Elon Musk's decision to prioritize China over India for Tesla's manufacturing unit. Vadhva, who exchanged emails with Musk a few years ago, warned him about the risks of operating in China, urging him instead to move manufacturing to India. He believes that Musk is making a critical mistake and will end up being the biggest loser for overlooking the Indian market. Last month, Musk postponed, remember, his planned visit to India, where he was supposed to meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and announce a $3 billion worth investment in a new car plant. However, shortly after, he visited China instead, securing significant concessions for Tesla and advancing plans for its advanced driver assistant package in Chinese market. Now, despite recent signs of strengthening ties between Tesla and India, with commitments of up to $2 billion for an EV plant and reduced import taxes on vehicles, any concrete or any announcement for that matter has been delayed from Tesla's side. Now, Indian officials remain hopeful thanks to recent policy changes that are favoring EVs and would also favor Tesla. But with that, we have run out of time on this show. Thank you very much for watching.
India is expected to sign an agreement to oversee the management of Chabahar port for the next decade, making it New Delhi's first venture into managing a port overseas. According to reports, Shipping Minister Sarbananda Sonowal is travelling to Iran for the signing ceremony. Now, Chabahar is a hub for the international north-south transport corridor, will allow shipping companies to use an alternative route that bypasses the sensitive and busy Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. Furthermore, it will give the Indian Navy an important staging outpost in some of the most strategic yet troubled waters in the world. Here's why Chabahar is crucial for India. Average container spot rates have more than doubled since